Hey y'all, everybody's favorite bumpkin here. We're back on Liberty Risk here to get the handlebar wiring done and mark out our bars where we got to pocket drill the holes where the wires can pass up through the bars. Because these bars, they're not dimpled, they're not drilled or anything like that. And the factory hand controls on the 750 Shadow, they originally had the wires run outside the handlebars. There's nothing wrong with that, but I figured we put this amount of work into putting the bars on here that he wanted and everything else, along with the risers and all that stuff. We might as well go and do a full court press on it. Let's run the wires inside the bars just for a cleaner look. So I'm going to show you guys how. Now, starting out, keep in mind on most metric motorcycles, not so much with Harley, but metric bikes, Yamaha, Kawasaki, Suzuki, blah, 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 blah. Inside the switch cases where they go on the handlebars, from the factory, they will typically have a little index bump in one of the clamp halves on the switch case. If you look right there by my finger, you can see it. Kinda. There, right there. Now the thing is, our bars, they're not drilled for that index pin. And I know a lot of people prefer to drill the bars for that index pin. Personally, I don't. I kind of find the middle ground with that. What I do is I take a Dremel tool and I knock that down, but I don't totally take it all the way out of there. I leave just a little bit of it. That way, when you put the bolts in the clamp half and you tighten it up, it pushes that pin against the bar, and whenever you do that, it's creating friction. Now, granted, if you hoss on it enough, yeah, your hand controls, they're going to spin and move. With metal case hand controls like this, once you tighten the screws up, they're not going to go anywhere. I prefer doing that over drilling the handlebar, because once you drill the handlebar, you've got exactly one spot where that switch case can be positioned at. This way, if you need to make minor tweaks or adjustments to it, or for rider preference, as far as the angle that it sets at, just for ergos and, some people got weird thumbs. Hey, who knows? It gives you a little bit of flexibility to where you can move stuff around to tailor it to whatever suits you best. So starting out with these things, just to mark them out, what I'll do on the throttle side, go ahead and put your throttle grip in there. No cables, nothing like that. You got to put the screws in there, but don't tighten them up all the way. You're going to want to leave them fairly loose. That way you can slide the whole mess over the handlebar, break out the Sharpie, you can mark where your position is, and then math into it from there to back off of it and figure out where you need to mark out for drilling your holes. I'll show you how we do that here in just a little bit. Right now, let's get these things where we can at least hang them on the bars and see where we're starting from. Yeah. This is my screwdriver. I know it may sound goofy or nerdy, but another thing that I like about these, now most cordless tools have this as a feature these days, but all these, they got a little pocket clip to where you can hang them on your pants pocket just to keep it handy. It's ambidextrous to where you can move it over to the other side if you're a southpaw, or if you just like setting it up for a cross draw, whatever floats your boat, man. All right, so we got our throttle housing with the throttle tube and the grip in it. Like I said, the screws are in there just all kind of loosey-goosey. They're just basically holding the two halves together and not much else at this point. There's a reason for that. We've still got that little index pin in there. We've not abbreviated him yet. What I'll do is just take these, slide them onto the handlebar, bottom them out like that. One thing that you got to pay attention to whenever you're doing this, you don't want to cram this all the way up on the handlebar and figure on it being installed there. You need to back this off, an eighth, 3/16 of an inch, something like that. The reason for that is you've got to have some in play on your throttle grip here to where it's moving free and it's not dragging mashed up against the end of the handlebar tube itself, because it gets draggy, it gets sticky. And another thing too, especially, and this is kind of a Florida problem, but this is something that I notice on my Roadstar occasionally because of the way my cruise control is set up. If you park a bike out in the sun, most bikes these days, pretty much all bikes these days, they have a plastic tube for the throttle tube. Well, if it sits out in the sun and it gets hot, what happens? Well, it gets hot, but it grows, it swells. On the really, really hot days and the really sunny days, I notice occasionally that my throttle grip will actually drag a little bit on the bastard glide just because it grows that much from sitting out in the sun cooking. Something to keep in mind. Okay, so we've got our switch case with our grip and everything. It's all the way bottomed out, and just kind of eyeballing it as far as where the switches need to point for ergonomic reasons. We're going to take it, grab the trusty old Sharpie here. Then what I do is I'll draw a line that travels along the handlebar. What this does, can't talk with a friggin' Sharpie cap in my mouth. What this does is this gives me a reference point for where I measured all this stuff out at and how I had it positioned. But I just follow that split from the hand control case, and this is my reference line for what angle they're setting at. So then after that, I know that I've got to scoot back this way a little bit to allow clearance for my throttle grip. Go ahead and make a mark around the diameter of the handlebar. Basically, you're making a T, if you will. But that denotes where that switch case is when it's all the way up. Now, whenever I go to installing this stuff and whenever I drill my holes for my wire access, I know that I'm going to come back off of this just a little bit to give me a little bit of clearance for my throttle tube. But it gives me a visual reference of where I'm starting from. Now, I'm not going to bore you guys with doing the clutch side, but the thing is, you do the exact same thing over on the clutch side. The upside there is you don't have any throttle tube you got to worry about because your grip glues on. In some cases, it may have set screws that anchor it down, but for the most part, grips glue on metric bikes. Let me have you guys take a look here. All right. Set our screws off to the side where they don't walk away. And get the throttle tube out of there because we don't need him faffing about right now. Okay. Here's the inside of your switch case. Now, if you notice, you've got two different wire runs that come out of here. We got the main run here with our harness plug that goes to the wiring harness. This is the part that's going to be running down inside the handlebar. This little guy right here, all this does is for your front brake light switch. Now, this can't be run inside the handlebar. It's got to be exposed where it can come out and make contact with the brake switch up on the master cylinder. But if you look down inside here, you notice that little screw. I'm sorry, I'm doing this backwards. You notice that little screw right there? What that does is that holds down a wire clamp that anchors these wires into this bottom channel on the switch case. So we're going to pull that screw out. Now, once you pull that screw out of there, you need to be kind of gentle with the wiring because this screw not only keeps the wires down in the bottom of this switch case housing, it also acts somewhat as a strain relief. So just be realistic, be careful whenever you're pulling your wires through the bars. If you got to pull on them like you're dragging a buck out of the woods on opening day, you're doing something wrong and you need to stop or else you're going to break something in here, okay? Just be realistic about it. Okay, now here on the clutch side, you can't quite do it the same as you did on the throttle side because that grip, you're going to have to cram that thing onto the handlebar because it stretches over it and it's a snug fit. Trust me, you don't want to throw that thing up there and then have to pull it back off. You can do it, but you're creating a lot more work for yourself. Plus, also, if you remember, when I made these handlebar extensions, I knurled the shit out of this one on the clutch side. That way the glue would have a little bit of extra texture to grab hold of to where we don't have to worry about grips spinning around on the bars and sliding around and stuff like that. Because it gets hot down here in Florida. Now what I did do, this is the quick and dirty way of doing this. Screwdriver, number 2 pencil, extension, whatever floats your boat. In this case, I'm using my little pocket flashlight here. Take it. Drop it in the grip like that. And then See how deep the inside of the grip is, and I'm just kind of eyeballing it here, and I'm just looking at this little spot on the pocket clip from my flashlight where it just happens to line up at. And then you can set it on the outside, and I know it's kind of hard to see with my thumb in the way, but I'm about to drop this thing. But we don't go all the way to the end of the grip. We go about a third of the way down on that chrome end cap on the inside of the grip, and then it stops. So that's our rough measurement. Now, honestly, yeah, right now I'm eyeballing this. I'm not going to measure it and everything. I'll save the important shit for whenever we're doing something, that requires a micrometer or a caliper or something to that level of precision. This is not one of those times, because plain Jane Mod 1 Marco eyeball, it's going to get the job done for you just fine. Here's how. Do the same thing on the switch case on the clutch side, just barely put the screws in like I was telling you about. Then take this, set it up top, and then you can see how much, if I move my big fat head, you can see how much overhang I've got for the end cap of the grip here. That's where it's landing on the end of the handlebar. So this is where this hand control is going to live. And we're going to make the same kind of T-shaped reference mark over on this side. That way we got a reference to go off of. And then we can mark out for our hole for our wire run on the inside of the switch case here, to where the wires are going to travel up and then move down. So again, take a Sharpie. Sharpie is totally fine for stuff like this because it comes off with rubbing alcohol, brake cleaner, whatever. I mean, half the time, like on chrome, you can wipe it off with your hand. Don't use it on paint or plastic. That doesn't work well. So just go off of your split in the switch case, make your reference mark, and then draw your T. Now, something that's kind of a Honda quirk, and Honda's the only one I've ever seen it on, but on the left-hand switch case on a lot of their bikes, particularly the Shadow here, they got this big ginormous hole here. They don't have a normal, flat face to it. And they got that plastic insert in there that I showed you guys earlier that I was carving out on the lathe, because the one that was in here, it's seen a few too many Florida sunrises, and that thing is crumbling as we speak. I mean, it's literally falling apart. So I'm making a new one out of aluminum to go in there to replace that. But that's not anything that's going to affect you dimensionally here if you decide to do that, or if you, have somebody make one for you. I'm not in the business of making switch case plugs, guys. Don't blow me up on that, because they're not fun to make. Anyway, keep in mind when you're doing all this, that's a one-piece thing, and it needs to slide on the bar before you apply any glue to your grips. Ask me how many times I've done that shit. I don't want to think about it. Okay, so we got our reference marks made on both sides of the handlebar for where our hand controls are going to land, at least the switch cases. We haven't done the brake or the clutch perch at this point yet. Stress yet. We're going to get to that here in a little bit. Right now we're worried about wiring and switches. So we've got that marked out. The only thing left to do, we've got to mark out this area here on the bottom of the top clamp for the risers. And that's where we've got to make an oval hole just to allow for the wires to exit and come down and tie into the rest of our wiring harness. There's not really any hard, fast, set rule about doing that. Obviously, don't make your hole huge, but you want to give yourself enough room where you can pull wires through there without it, pinching or cutting or trying to skin the insulation off of them. You definitely want to have shrink tube on there just to give it an extra layer of protection, and not only that, give it a better finish look when it's all said and done, because from here down, that's going to be exposed and you are going to see it. And we're probably going to run that stuff inside of like some braided wire sleeving or something like that, just to give it a little cleaner look when we're done. Usually whenever I'm doing bars like this, I'll make my hole for my wire exit. What I try to do is eyeball it to where it's going to be on the bottom side of the bar facing straight down at roughly 6 o'clock, because you don't want the hole facing forward, because if you're caught out in the rain or something like that, you got the potential for wind-blown rain to blow up in there and create a rust issue inside the handlebars, or a short circuit or corrosion in your wiring. So think it through. But what I will do is I'll make a Sharpie line on either side of the inside of the riser clamps where the bars get clamped down in the risers themselves, and that way, again, I've got a reference area I can go off of. Now, as far as the holes themselves go, typically on a bike like this, it's a 1-inch handlebar. You know, pop you a center punch in there after you determine where your hole needs to be. And on this one, since we don't have any extra stuff coming in there along with it, typically a 1/2-inch diameter hole is going to get you plenty good. Now, one thing that I like to do, and I'll show you here a little bit later in the video, whenever I drill that hole, I'll drill it straight down, but then I'll tip my drill back and run it to where it kind of teardrops that hole just a little bit, to where it doesn't have a sharp edge that the wires are getting pulled across, and it kind of helps guide the wires up inside the bars and, you know, following along on the path they're going to go. Down here on the bottom of the riser clamp where the wire exit is, typically I'll make an oval shaped slot. I'll make it about 1 inch wide, about an inch long, about a 1/2 inch wide. And pretty much what I do is I just take a center punch, make 2 pops in it, drill 2 pilot holes, drill me 2 1/2-inch holes side by side, and then I take a Dremel tool and I marry the 2 holes together. It's effective. It keeps the wires from getting chafed. It gives you room to pull wires through. It's easy to work with later on down the road if you, for whatever reason, may have to pull wires back out of there to make a repair, or if you're changing things up. Plan for down the road. Okay, so I got our holes marked out on the bars. We got a couple of center punch pops in there just to mark where we're going to poke a hole in them. I'm going to do these on my drill press. I want to give you guys a couple tips that'll help you out. Even if you got one of the little dinky, you know, tabletop drill presses, it makes life a whole lot easier, and it's way easier than trying to do this crap by hand. Now, you can do it with a hand drill if that's all you got. Just be patient, take your time, figure out a way to anchor the bars down. That way you're not juggling, trying to hold the handlebar with one hand and a drill with another and keep it all in line and everything. You know, if you have to, call your neighbor. Say, hey, I'll give you a beer if you hold this for me. You guys may remember on some of my tool videos, I was talking about these little center drills like this. It's kind of hard to see, I know, I'm sorry, y'all. But all they are is just a little stubby, short drill bit. Now, where that comes in handy, since they're short and they're kind of fat, they don't bend, they don't wiggle, and they don't flex. So it makes it a whole lot easier getting the hole started. And that's exactly what these things are intended for. They're meant to start a hole. They're not meant to drill a hole, okay? So you start a hole with one of these guys, and then after you get the hole started, that's when you come in with your normal drill bit and you open her up from there. Another thing that comes in handy, if you've got a drill press, or if you just got a bench at the house and a table or coffee table or nightstand, or, you know, the dresser at the Motel 6 that you happen to be staying in at that point in time, if you're on the road somewhere. Allegedly, we don't do stuff like that. This little drill jig from Harbor Freight, you guys know what I'm talking about. These things are $8-10, something like that, but they got a couple of slots where they drill, or where they'll bolt into the table on your drill press or workbench, whatever, and they're just an inverted V block like that. Take a little tape, put in here, pad them, you know, keep from scratching up chrome or powder coat, things like that. But it's kind of handy because they've got a measuring scale on both sides of it, to where you can, you know, if you've got something where you're trying to measure it somewhat close to accurately, you can do it with that. But also, it's a lot easier drilling tube on something like this, because the tube is going to lay in the channel and it doesn't try to move around on you. It stabilizes it to where you can get your hole started straight, and you can get it where you want it to be instead of it wandering off and all that kind of stuff. Another thing, you know, if you don't want to go out and spend real money on one of these, and you got a piece of angle iron laying around and you got a welder, hey, just chop up a couple of chunks of angle iron, make some legs for it, turn it up like that, put some duct tape on it to keep from scratching stuff up. Boom, you got a drill jig. Think outside the box and use what you got. Some of y'all may notice the apprentice marks. Yeah, we'll go with that. The divots that are in the table on my drill press. Guys, this thing was made in the 60s, okay? And I don't know who put them there, but it wasn't me. And that is why I like my senior citizen drill press. This thing weighs a ton. It will hurt you if you have to move it around the shop, but it's stout, it's rigid, it doesn't flex, and it's damn quiet. Really? Story of my life, coming up a little short. Missed it by that much. That's no good. That thing wobbles like a sailor on his first port call. Great. I got to move the table on this thing. The only downside to my senior citizen drill press is it doesn't have a rack gear to where you can crank the table up and down. You got to muscle it. And this thing is not light. Okay, now that I got my life figured out, let's drill some holes. Now you notice I didn't run that center drill all the way through. I made a hole, and we're going to follow it up with a normal drill bit, but I got a little bit of a taper there to kind of help ease that drill bit into the hole, especially since we're drilling on tube, because think about it, it's round, it's not flat. So when it first bites in, it's only going to bite on the edge here before it gets down far enough where it can cut all the way around. That's when they try to walk around on you. Rinse, lather, and repeat on the other side. And then the middle. Uh-oh, that's a problem. I ain't got enough height there. Or do I? It's not an earthquake, guys, I promise. I had to move the camera. There. We'll just throw a setup block in there to where we can gain a little bit of altitude. And there we go, problem solved. Now I did decide I'm going to do 3 holes on this because I got an idea in my head. I'm going to make this slide a little wider than what I normally do, but I got something rolling around in my tiny little monkey brain, and I'm going to see if I can make it work. That's crooked as hell. There we go. All right, just a heads up. When you're drilling handlebars or any kind of tube for that matter, if you got a certain hole you're shooting for, work up to it in a couple of steps. Do not try to go full-blown Leroy Jenkins and hit your target diameter right off the jump with your starter hole, because you're going to end up with a crooked hole and you're probably going to break a few drill bits along the way. And we're going to have to drop the table back down. I've seen guys modify trailer jacks to where they can use that for raising their drill press table up and down, and that's starting to look more attractive every day. Y'all see what I'm doing there, right? Every time I drill a hole, I shake all my drill cuttings out of my guide block here. That way they don't filter their way down and end up gouging the crap out of my chrome. Now this is aluminum, but still, at the end of the day, realistically, I should have some kind of padding on this. So those are my dumbs. Don't do my dumbs, find your own dumbs. That's going to be the scary one. Whenever you've got holes that overlap and you're trying to drill, whenever they break through, they try to catch on the flutes of your bit. Take your Dremel tool, use your Dremel to open that hole up to the rest of your dimension on your oval. Even if you still got to drill the 2 outboard holes to your target diameter, don't try to drill the one in the middle. Just use your Dremel to open it up from that point, because if that thing snags that drill bit, it's either going to break your drill bit, or worse, it's going to snag on it and it's going to jerk the handlebars out of your hand or whatever you're trying to drill, and then it's going to proceed to fling it around at a high rate of speed and beat the ever living absolute shit out of you until you can manage to get to the switch on your drill press. You can't stop it with your hands, man. It's like a machine or something. Okay, last one. We got the big chungus on deck right now. This is our 1/2-inch hole that we're drilling to our finish size. Now, keep in mind, the bigger the hole, the more it's going to try to grab and bind up on you, so keep a good grip on it. This is the one that makes me nervous. No, I ain't doing that. We're going to slot that out with a Dremel tool and a carbide burr. I don't feel like wearing these things for a hat tonight. Well, poop. It just dawned on me. I don't have any 1/8-inch shank carbide bits here for my Dremel. I got plenty of them, don't get me wrong. It's just they're all at work. I don't have any here in the temple. I got to fix that tomorrow. Besides, I want to show off my Walmart Hyper Tough cordless Dremel tool. This thing's a beast, y'all. I mean, don't snooze on this stuff. Every day that I use this stuff, I am getting more and more impressed by it. This thing is a hoss. There you go, guys. That's basically the nuts and bolts of how I mark stuff out for running internal wiring inside handlebars. And this is applicable for metric bikes, Harleys, pretty much whatever. The same basic principles are going to apply. Now, unfortunately, we're already kind of running along on time, and me and my counterpart Shelby at the Ride Factory, we are covered up at work, and it makes for some long damn days. And the downside of that is, unfortunately, that doesn't leave a whole hell of a lot of time to where I can make videos in the evening after I get off of work, because life, occasionally I do like to, visit the wife unit and all that. So what we're going to do, we're going to leave this off here right now. But Thanksgiving's next week, and we got some downtime. So that's going to give me some time to put some stuff together to where I can not only show you guys how we do the wiring on the bars and how we run them through the bars. Also, we're going to dive into making the cables for this motorcycle, making the brake line, because we're not going to buy this stuff off the shelf. We're going to make it to where it fits. That way we can get it to fit and follow along with the handlebars the way we want it to get the look that we're after, okay? The Thanksgiving Turkey Day special for Ranwood Park next week, I understand everybody, you've got family, and as do I. However, fair warning, that one's going to take some time, all right? That's going to be a big one. If you want to kind of get a head start on things just a little bit and see some of the electrical products that I use and I recommend to people, head over to my Patreon, because over in the electrical section on my Patreon, I've got a pretty extensive breakdown of tools, supplies, links to where you can purchase some of this stuff as far as wire, connectors, crimp pliers, things like that. And it's all very affordable. It's nothing that's going to break the bank. And plus, you can buy one piece at a time here and there to where if you need to, you can spread it out a little bit to where it doesn't hammer the pocketbook quite so hard right off the jump. Speaking of Patreon, I would be remiss if I did not take a minute to thank every single individual that may be watching this right now that is a member of my Patreon. If you're not a member of my Patreon, I would encourage you to head over there, check us out. Now remember, it doesn't cost one plug nickel to join my Patreon. We have free membership options available. We don't hide anything behind a paywall. I don't believe in that. If I know something, you're going to know something. It's going to be out there for the whole world to see. Everybody that's over on my Patreon that chooses to help support us in our endeavor here at the temple, and the whole idea behind keeping old bikes alive and keeping them on the road and out of the junkyard, my sincerest thanks to you. I wish each and every single one of you guys a prosperous new year, and I hope you guys get a a full belly and a turkey coma from the annual, turkey onslaught that's coming up this coming week. Until then, we're going to leave this off right now. However, like I said, fair warning, brace yourself, because the upcoming Ramblin' Parked episode, it's going to be a big one. I'm not going to lie, okay? We got a lot of info to cover. We got a lot of stuff to cram in on the video camera. So stay tuned. Might want to, loosen up the belt a notch or two just to allow for a little bit of temporary growth, depending on how many times you make a trip back to the kitchen. And also, just a heads up on where we're going with Tool Talk at the Temple. I'm kind of over it with the way my mill has been throwing a hissy fit here lately. I'm going to fix it, and I'm going to fix it my way. Stay tuned. Y'all are going to get a kick out of this. So anyway, we're going to pull the plug on this one tonight because I don't want to mention what time it is. Let's just say that it's, well, if it was deer season, this would be about the time you would be climbing up in your deer stand, okay? So, yeah. Remember, I love you guys. I'll catch you on the flip side, okay?
Force will be with you, always.